on the computer. It'll be up available on the website later. Here we are on the 19th of May on our town hall meeting, Social Security Administration work incentives. We have Michael and we have Patrick presenting. So gentlemen, take it away. It's all yours. If people could stay muted unless you have a question.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start it off. Mike, you can pull the PowerPoint up. You can get it up.
Got it.
I'm not seeing it over here. Hey,
Can you guys see that okay?
it's coming up a little. Yeah, there you go. Okay, so yeah, I'm Patrick Mattis, and along with my partner Mike Kogis, we're going to talk to you about work incentives that Social Security Administration has to help you stay connected to your benefits, medically and financially, while you test your ability to return to work. So both Mike and I work in San Diego, the downtown Social Security office. We're what's called task specialists. We'll go over that program a little bit. Mike will touch on that, but it's kind of like a financial aid program. And we administer that program for most of Southern California, except for the LA area, as well as the states of Hawaii and Arizona. A little bit about myself before we get involved in this. I started with the federal government in 1989. I kind of tell you I've been around a while. I offloaded trucks for the Navy for about 14 years, and then I went to school at night and got a degree, and then transferred over to Social Security just after 9/11. I started off doing like front counter Social Security card stuff, and then worked my way up to this position about 15 years ago. And I had a long-time partner who retired a few years ago, and lucky for me, they decided to replace him. And then Mike came on board. Mike, do you want to say anything?
Hi, and glad to be here, and glad to present on work incentives to this great group. I was born and raised in San Diego and also in Baja. And after college, I went to work doing job development with the San Diego Urban Corps. Then with the US government in Nicaragua, did community development there, came back and did vocational rehabilitation with the San Diego Labor Council until getting on with Social Security about 12 years ago. And this is about my 4th year as a PASS specialist. I love what I do. I love helping individuals navigate all the policies and be aware of all the programs and safety nets that there are to be able to become financially independent.
Yes, this this is kind of a unique position. There's only about 35 of us nationwide, so that's why we have somewhat large servicing area. But we do like to get out in the community. Obviously, because of COVID, we haven't done any face-to-face training in well over a year. So we have taken advantage of Zoom and MS Teams to try to get out. We appreciate Rick setting this up. So today there's not a big audience here, so if at any point you have a question, just chime in. You jump in, or you can put a chat and Rick can relay it to us. But we'll go ahead and get going here. So Mike, go ahead and hit the so Social Security realizes that most people with disabilities want to return to work. Because of that, we offer a package of work incentives, whether you're on SSDI or SSI, that are going to allow you to return to work and stay connected to your benefits. Go ahead, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the next slide. So there's a lot of urban myths that go along with returning to work. And we like to dispel some of those today. And one of them is, if I start working, my benefits will stop or my income will go down. So word on the street typically is, don't go back to work, you'll lose your benefits. It's actually not true. Again, we have a lot of work incentives, and when we get done with this presentation, you're gonna see that you can actually stay connected for years and years after you return to work. Some of these work incentives are unique to each program, but there are some that are overlap for both programs. Another myth is, I can just make more money not working, kind of like these people that get unemployment right now. But the truth is, you're always better off working. You'll always have more money if you're working than you will if you don't work. If you're on SSI, we don't take $1 for every dollar that you make away from your benefit. If you're on SSDI, you could potentially keep your entire check each month and continue to work. Someone mentioned something earlier that sounded like they were doing something similar. So you're always better off working than not working. It's not going to trigger us to do any kind of medical review and say, wait a minute, red flag, you've come back to work. We're going to take a close look at your case. That is not going to happen. Another one is I can't work because I'll lose my medical insurance. So sometimes people are concerned about not so much their financial check, but they're concerned about losing their Medi-Cal or their Medicare. What actually turns out that even when you potentially lose your actual cash aid each month, you'll end up keeping your Medi-Cal or Medicare for years and years after your financial cash aid stops. And that's because Social Security realizes that's very important to people trying to return to work. They have obviously a disability and they're using their medical insurance more so than others. Go ahead, Mike. Just some more fears and myths. I'm afraid that if I go to work and my benefits stop, I'll get sick again and I'm going to have a hard time getting back on benefits. So a lot of folks end up taking 1 or 2 years to get approved for their disability. So they went through such great lengths to obtain the benefits. They're very, very reluctant to go back to work because of the fear of having to go through that again. When in fact, the truth is we have a program specifically designed for, if that actually happened and you went through all the worker incentives and we actually did stop your benefits, we have a program that is going to pay you while we make a decision. You won't have to go through the same process you did when you initially filed for disability. Mike will go over that. Another one is I can't get a good paying job. Well, the truth is there's our program, the PASS program. Again, it's kind of like financial aid. We have a ticket to work program. Most people have heard about that, where we pay employment networks and community partners to assist people to return to work, write resumes, assist with job development, finding employment, reporting wages. The last one is probably the biggest myth is I get an SSA check. If I had a dime for every time I've heard that, I'd be a millionaire. Actually, SSA is the acronym for the company, Social Security Administration. And the only person that gets an SSA check is Mike and I, because we work there. Okay. When you hear that from somebody, it's probably because they get SSDI. And one easy way to tell what benefit someone gets is I always ask them, what day of the month do you get your check? And if they tell me I get it on the 1st, well, I know it's SSI because that pays on the 1st. If they get it on the 3rd, it's SSDI. Or if they get 2 checks, well, that means they're getting one on the 1st and they're getting one on the 3rd. At this point, I'm going to turn this over to Mike and take it from here, Mike.
Thank you, Patrick. On that point of SSI versus SSDI, there are some differences between the two programs. Though they're both disability benefits through the Social Security Administration, starting off with SSI, it's a needs-based program. You have to have low income and low resources to qualify, as well as be found to be disabled. There's resource limits. You can't have as an individual more than $2,000 in resources, typically bank account balance, value of a second car, stocks, bonds, things like that. Um, in a particular month, if you go over $2,000 in resources at the very beginning of the month, you won't be eligible for SSI for that month. And the limit is $3,000 if you're a member of a couple. So it's a little higher that way. For kids, it can be $4,000 or $5,000 if it's the beneficiary is a minor. SSI is paid from the general tax revenue. The monthly payment can go up and down with income. It's a sliding scale. If your income goes up from another source, typically your SSI will go down in unison. So it also brings about automatic Medi-Cal eligibility. If you're eligible for SSI, you're eligible for Medi-Cal, the term for Medicaid here in California. Switching gears to SSDI, or Social Security Disability Insurance, it's very much like what it sounds like, an insurance program. Folks worked, and essentially through their pay stubs and the deductions were paying into this program. And if they become disabled and can no longer work, well, this is getting money back. Their FICA contributions through their paychecks. It's paid from the Title II Trust Fund, not from general tax revenue. And the monthly payment is determined by average lifetime earnings. More that you've worked, sometimes that can influence as well. Social Security Disability Insurance brings with it Medicare eligibility, but there's a 2-year waiting period. So after the month of effectuation of your claim, you'd have to wait 2 years in order to get Medicare. It's the only real time you can get Medicare before age 65, unless you're on dialysis, for example. There's some exception for that. Some cases, say if it's an initial claim for SSDI and the person got denied at the initial level, appealed that and got denied and had to go to a hearing and was approved at the hearing level. Well, by that time, most times 2 years has passed anyway. So when they're approved for benefits in that scenario, a lot of times they start off with their benefits and also with Medicare because it's been 2 years. We're going to roll out with SSI and go over work incentives tied to that program. But first off, some background. It's a supplemental program, and it's for those who are aged, over age 65, disabled, or blind. You must be a U.S. citizen or qualified alien. You can be a permanent resident, having worked a certain number of years here in the country. Sometimes there's refugee status as well that can make for eligibility. Income and resources of the spouse or parents may affect eligibility. So no matter if you're disabled, if you're a minor and your father's Tom Hanks, well, you're not going to get SSI. I used to use the example of if you're disabled and you're married to Bill Gates, that's not going to affect your SSI, but it looks like that situation's changed a little bit recently. So, and then I've got a HP alert that just came up on my computer, and I'm Xing that out.
Michael?
Yeah.
Can I ask you a quick question since we're on this subject?
Absolutely.
So I'm Heidi and this is Sabrina. We're from Rehab Care Coordination. Wanted to ask you a question about the income resources for the parents of a minor. So we have a lot of children we apply for SSI benefits, and their parents are getting in-home support services, so that's accountable income. So they usually make anywhere between, if they get the max, somewhere between $400 and $4,500 a month. Does that make them ineligible then for SSI if they're making more than $2,000 or $3,000 for a couple?
A lot of times that income through in-home support services is actually excluded from counting against the child's record. And also we have a situation when, say, a spouse is working and taking care of the person on SSI, um, same issue there, where it won't count as income, but it's got to be, flagged appropriately through our channels. And their pay stubs are pretty well known in our circles with IHSS, pretty emblematic. Um, but sometimes if there's other kids in the household, that can influence whether income affects the SSI child's eligibility and their payment. But yeah, we run up against that a lot, and we try to catch it and train our technicians to catch it. Sometimes it gets counted when it shouldn't, um, and vice versa. But
I,
yeah, that's an issue on our end as well.
yeah, I didn't know that. We had actually gone to an appointment with a client who had a son. It was just the one son who was disabled, and the father was under IHSS. And of course, it was over 4,000. So I thought, oh, he's not going to be eligible. But then one of your representatives told us, oh, no, he is eligible because um, he is directly taking care of his son through IHSS. So it's not a countable resource. So
Right.
I always tell everybody, just ask. It doesn't
Yeah.
hurt to ask. And you never know, because you can, in this case, he's the one who shared this with us, had no idea. I could have done it with other clients, but every time I go to an appointment or we do an appointment over the phone, we learn something new, which
Yep.
is great.
Yeah, so essentially when you're the parent and your child's on SSI, if you're receiving IHSS to care for that child, it's excluded income. Does not count. And you also mentioned the 3 or 4,000 if they were making 3 or 4,000, but don't get that confused with the resource limit.
Right.
That resource limit is how much you actually have in the bank saved. If you're making 3 or 4,000, well, you're probably paying your rent. You're probably paying. I mean, you could be making 6,000, but how much do we really have at the end of the month? Zero or little to none. So the resource limit is 3,000 for a couple, and the child gets 2,000 too. So a family with 2 parents and a child, it's actually 5,000. But again, also if you're a couple and your spouse is on SSI and you're being paid to care for your spouse, well, that's excluded as well.
Yep.
There are scenarios though where mom's working for IHSS but not to care for their own child.
Right.
And that scenario, yeah, that income counts.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's a very good question. There's no waiting period for SSI, and we're going to go over that with SSDI. If you get approved initially for SSI, basically you're eligible typically for some back pay as well. Going back to the month after you applied, you would be eligible if found eligible and under all the other criteria. So there's really no waiting period there. Also, like we mentioned, automatic Medi-Cal eligibility here in California. Quick SSI payment computation to show how income affects SSI. Say if this individual has $500 from a Social Security benefit, be it, let's call it SSDI, and we don't count $20 of that, that's a general exclusion. So $480 of that would count against their SSI. What if they're working as well and they're making $500 a month gross in wages? We can deduct $65 from what we count on that, which is $435 the remainder. Then we divide that number by 2. So of those $500 wages, $217.50 counts against SSI. You can see here in this example that this in of itself is a work incentive, because say the Social Security income, or be it a pension, or be it income that's not derived directly and currently from work, there's a tiny exclusion for that. But the exclusion for wages or net earnings from self-employment, there's quite a bit of an exclusion where we're lopping off $65, and then the remainder we're dividing by 2 and only counting that. So we're counting less than half of earnings from work against someone's SSI. So their total accountable income in this case is $217.50 from the wages, $480 from, say, a Social Security disability insurance benefit. So $697.50 total. The current regular quote unquote rate for SSI is $954.72 for an adult. If we subtract the 697, this person would get $257.22 from SSI, even though on the surface, their gross wages and their Social Security check is above the 954 limit. Because of all the exclusions, they're still able to get $250 and change from SSI. Now, there's work incentives that both SSI and SSDI have, but there's also work incentives that are unique to both types of benefits. SSI has impairment-related work expenses. If, in general, you have to pay for something out of pocket because of your disabling conditions in order to be able to work, this could be medication copays, therapies, gym membership to keep in shape, and keep on, that helps with being able to work despite your disability, various things. And like you had mentioned, the key is to ask Social Security about it. Our policy is very gray in this area and skewed towards the claimant. But many people do not take advantage of this policy. Impairment related work expenses, like Rick had mentioned before, the Red Book is a great source, probably the best, for information on this concept. Blind work expenses, there's even more expenses for those who are visually impaired or statutory, have statutory blindness, I should say. We don't count taxes that are deducted from the paycheck. So essentially we're counting net wages, not gross wages. Air conditioners, various stuff counts here that would reduce what we count towards SSI. Earned income exclusion, that's the $65 in that example. Plan to achieve self-support, we're gonna go over that later. Financial aid program and an income exclusion program, as well as a resource exclusion program. Property essential to self-support, a little known policy regarding, say, a business bank account, tools or equipment, or even property used for a self-employment venture. Those are excluded. They don't count towards the SSI resource limit. Expedited reinstatement, we mentioned a little bit about that. We're going to go into this and some other concepts later. Continued medical eligibility, we're going to go over that. For SSI, if you were working and your earnings made it so that you had some months where you weren't getting an SSI check because your earnings were so high, and say that level of earnings comes down for you, well, you can jump right back on SSI. Student earned income exclusion, if you're under the age of 22 and you're going to school, it could be also a program like Chase. It doesn't have to be a brick and mortar school either. It can be an online school as long as it's accredited through the state in which it is located. We don't count a good chunk of your earnings up to almost $8,000 for the year, 1,930 in a given month we can exclude. A lot of times students don't even reach those limits, but you're able to have your wages completely excluded from SSI up to those limits. Also, there's the 301 concept, and that is that if we do a continuing medical review, which we do in cases every 3 to 7 years typically, and we determine that you're no longer eligible based on disability criteria for benefits, there's a Section 301 policy whereby if you're in a program that has an IEP, if you're in a vocational rehabilitation program, if you're on the PASS plan, and there's other examples, then you can continue on your benefits while you're still remain in these programs. Continuation of Medi-Cal. A lot of people think, oh, if I start working, I'm going to lose my Medi-Cal insurance that's tied to my SSI. And this is a biggie that we have to push back on because you'll see the numbers here. They surprise a lot of people. Through SSI, um, given the $954 regular adult rate, you can work and earn up to about $12.50 almost full time and still have something in SSI. That translates to about $1,994 a month and still get something from SSI. It gets even better than that though. Say if you work and earn above that level, there's a 1619B provision that there's a Medicaid use test and a threshold test. The Medicaid use test might be the easiest test in the world. Basically, there's 3 questions. Are you using your Medi-Cal insurance? And essentially, if the answer is yes, ding, 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 you pass the test. The threshold test is such that, and they've boosted this $10,000 or by $10,000 a year from 2020 to 21. It got even more favorable for folks, such that if you work and earn under $47,395 a year, you can still have an active SSI case. And if you have an active SSI case, you have automatic Medi-Cal. That translates to almost $4 grand a month. Almost $25 an hour you can work and earn and still be tied to SSI. We do reviews on these cases, many cases where we haven't even paid the individual in some years because they've been working and earning over, say, the 1994, but under a month, but under $4 grand a month. Even if you're working and earning over $47,000 a year, you can still have Medi-Cal. There's the Medi-Cal 250% working disabled program. And as long as you're not earning over 65 grand a year, which translates to about 5,400 a month or $34 an hour, you could still have Medi-Cal. Now, granted, it's a sliding scale and you might have a premium, but pretty much guaranteed that premium's going to be lower than what you would have through a private health insurance. So you can work and earn up to 65 grand a year and still be connected to Medi-Cal. And even if you're working and earning over 65 grand a year, typically at that point, you're probably getting your health insurance through your employer on average. So there's a big safety net when it comes to working. You're on SSI and being tied to Medi-Cal. Another SSI work incentive example, and this is kind of an extreme one, but it's used to illustrate all the different type of work incentives through SSI. Say Tom goes back to work at Petco Park and he's on the regular adult rate of SSI, maximum $954 a month, doesn't have any other countable income until he goes back to work. Well, what would happen to his benefit? Say if he's working 25 and earning $2,550 in gross wages there at Petco Park. Now he's under the age of 22 and he's going to school as well during the night. So he'd be eligible for $1,930 of a monthly student earned income exclusion. And he's also eligible for the $65 and the $20 general exclusions. So that's $85 off. We're going to count right off the bat only $535 of his income, a fifth of what he's earning. But say he pays $50 a month for prescription copays, we can deduct that. So he's only going to have $485 count against his SSI. But wait, there's more. Say if we, of course, out of that 485, we're going to divide by 2. So we're only going to count $242 anyway. But say if Tom is blind as well, and we're not going to count the taxes that are deducted from his paycheck and the lunches at his work that he has to pay for. So that's $100 right there lumped off. $142.50 countable income. But since he's in school, like I mentioned, he gets a $42.50 exclusion through PASS, kind of as a reimbursement for what he pays for books and for his computer. So we're counting $100 of his $2,550 monthly pay stubs against his SSI, I should say. So his 954 goes down a whopping $100, $854 in SSI, and $2,550 actually in wages. So his total income, it's actually more like 3,400 and $4. I made a $50 error there, but long story short, these are all the exclusions that can be possible. Again, an extreme example, but more often than not, we're seeing people not take advantage of work incentives that are available to them rather than doing so. So just an example to show all the things that can be excluded from wages or net earnings from self-employment. Pop quiz, just to make sure you're paying attention. I have SSI. If I start working, A, my SSI will stop no matter what. B, the entire amount of my wages will count against me. C, I will automatically lose my Medi-Cal. Or D, I will earn more income overall, and there are several incentives to help me. What do you guys think? And Patrick, your answer doesn't count.
D.
D.
Again, Patrick is wrong. You would think doing this presentation many times he would get it right, but still never ceases to fail there. Yes, the answer is D as in David. You'll get more income overall, and there's a lot of incentives to help.
Michael, can I ask you a question?
Yes, good time. Yeah.
Is there someone, so for instance, we have a client and they are working and they're receiving SSI and they're concerned, or they just happen to just get a new job. Is there someone that they could talk to in Social Security that can help them through this process? It's a lot.
Yes.
It's a lot for me, for us to absorb, and then let alone someone who's really trying to figure his way through the Social Security maze. So.
Very good question. And the agency definitely thought of that years ago when they developed the WIPA program, work incentives planning professionals that are trained by Social Security. They have to re-up their training every year on work incentives, and their services are absolutely free of charge. And they're later on in this presentation, I'm going to give you as part of the PowerPoint, there's a number to the local WIPA who helps in work incentive planning. But there's also, if you go on choosework.net, which is the Ticket to Work website, choosework.net, you can look for service providers there, and there's even a checkbox for WIPA services. Type in your zip code, and it'll pop up the WIPA for your area.
And Michael, in here, I believe, isn't it Aleda Taruno?
From Disability Rights, yep.
And Heidi, Heidi, she is with Disability Rights California. She's presented a couple times. Aleda Taruno. So if not, if you don't find it anywhere, just email me. I've got her contact info.
Okay.
And she'll be actually doing the next town hall meeting.
Oh, okay. Wonderful.
This is what you're asking for is literally the bread and butter of what they do, helping people navigate through all these work incentives and think of things they might not have thought of, and to be aware of all that's there and some of the pitfalls, but also some of the safety nets as well. Very good question. WIPA services can help for those on SSDI as well, or SSI, or those who have both. Switching gears work incentive wise to SSDI, Social Security Disability Insurance, brief background. It's based on quarters of coverage similar to our retirement program, but more importantly, to become eligible, you have to have recent work experience, roughly earning or working about 5 out of the last 10 years and having earnings in those years. It's not based on financially, like I said, it's an insurance program. Each quarter is currently for 2021 is $1,470. So you can max out with 4 quarters as $5,880 a year. So if you work and earn close to $6,000 a year, you've earned all 4 quarters in that year. It doesn't really matter what quarter of the year that you worked and earned. Maybe you had a big first quarter and earned all 6 grand in that quarter. That's fine. At the end of the year, it'll be considered that you had 4 quarters of coverage. And you need 20 quarters out of the last 40. That's why I say essentially I've worked and earned over 6 grand, even though the limits were less in prior years. But to be safe, worked and earned over 6 grand, 5 out of the last 10 years for eligibility. It's not enough that you had worked years and years ago for SSDI. Those quarters will count for retirement, but for SSDI, it's more important than the recent earnings within the last 10 years. You have to be found disabled or blind under Social Security rules, just like SSI. There is a 5-month waiting period such that at your month of eligibility, say you got approved and your month of eligibility was in the past, say it was January 2021, technically your eligibility and for payment of those benefits wouldn't begin until say June 2021. There is that 5-month waiting period. Though, like I kind of mentioned in SSI, a lot of times there's a 5-month waiting period anyway to get a word on your initial application once they decide on it. So a lot of people end up on average receiving their benefits right about the time that they're approved for the benefits. But there's a little bit less retroactivity with the SSDI than there can be with SSI sometimes. Medicare eligible after entitled for 24 months, the 2-year rule, we went over that. And the SSDI work incentives are, again, to think of this in completely different terms than SSI. This is a different ballgame, different set of rules. There's a trial work. We're going to go over each of these, but the trial work period, the important number to know there is 940. We're going to go over that. Extended period of eligibility, 1310 and 2190. We're going to go over that. Expedited reinstatement, continuation of Medicare, and the 301 vocational rehabilitation payment. We already went over that. Applies to both SSI and SSDI. Ticket to work, we're going to go over that, and that applies to both benefits as well. But those top 4 are strictly SSDI work incentives. Now, here's a good graph developed by the Department of Rehabilitation, our cousins at the state level, to give you a visual of the timing of these work incentives. They don't all apply at the same time. Like a lot of times SSI can apply, but they're sequential. So you'll have your trial work period, the first 9 months, say you're working and earning over $940. And there's a 5-year rolling period during which that trial work period would apply. Then you get into, say you've worked the 9 months, and they don't have to be consecutive, but you got to the point where you worked and earned 9 trial work period months. Technically, there's a 3-month grace period as well. And then after that period, there's a 3-year period that starts called the EPE, Extended Period of Eligibility. And this is very much the zero-sum game period, where if you work and earn over a certain amount, you could technically come off the benefits. If you work and earn under, you'd be fine. But there's different things that they do to that factor into that period, and we'll go over some of those. And then even after that 3-year period, there's a 5-year consecutive period of expedited reinstatement, such that if you, because of your disability, and say you've come off benefits because you worked and earned over the limit for the EPE, but down the line, within this 5-year period after that, you say you can't work as much or can't work anymore due to your disability, you can refile for benefits and still receive right away those benefits while your application is being processed. The trial work period allows the claimant to test workability while still receiving their full SSDI for 9 months. Plus, there's that 3-month grace period. What I like to tell people is, if they have this new trial work period and they haven't used it up before, then they technically can work and earn $1 million a month for 12 months and still get their SSDI for those 12 months, literally. A lot of people think they're going to lose it right away, but no, that the trial work period is there to help them attempt work. Now, one trial work period month is used when earnings are $940 or over. during the month, or 80 hours if self-employed. It's kind of a different test for self-employment. We give you a rolling 5-year period to earn the 9 months. So it doesn't have to be consecutive. You might go many, many months not earning over 940, in which case that wouldn't trigger a month. And it could be sporadic. If you're earning at or above the current SGA level, we pay for the 10th month and 2 additional grace months. That's the 3-year grace, 3-month grace period. So technically, a lot of times the trial work period ends up being 12 months rather than 9. And no other work incentives apply during this. Like, we can't lower the 940 with any other work incentives. During the next period we can, but not during the trial work period. So let's review the numbers. That's 12 months, 9 trial work period months, plus the 3 grace period months. You can receive full SSDI, and you get your wages from work, of course, minus what Uncle Sam takes out of taxes. Now we get to the next period of extended period of eligibility. That's a 36-month period, 3 years. So if your earnings are above SGA 1310, you're not going to get your SSDI. And if your earnings are below, then you're fine with your SSDI. Now, in actuality, the way this works, because we don't have a real-time essential monitoring of someone's work activity, is typically if you're going to work and earning over a certain amount, or even if you're going over to work, or if you're working, you want to obviously report that to Social Security. There's a form we use to report that as well as your monthly pay stubs, or sometimes quarterly. You can report. SSI, it's always monthly, but we do these work reviews, and sometimes months can go by, even if you're working over as SGA, where you'd still be tied to your benefits because we're still working on the case. Sometimes we do averaging, where maybe you're over the SGA limit, but there's a bunch of months where you're under it, and we might average those months. And if the average is under the SGA limit, then you'd be fine. Other times we might say, oh, if it's less than 6 months of working, that's an unsuccessful work attempt, and we'll chalk it up to that, and it won't adversely affect your benefits. But it's not an automatic, like, the month you go over SGA, you lose your benefits. There's some lag in that, but technically the rules are such as that. So that's 45 months now, the 9 through trial work period. Technically 48 with those 3 grace periods months. And you can receive your full SSDI check and their wages if you're working and earning under the SGA level. 1310 can continue indefinitely if after the 36-month period, the claimant's earnings are always under 1310. So this extended period of eligibility, even though it's flagged for 3 years, can continue indefinitely if that threshold of earnings isn't met. Expedited reinstatements say that threshold was met and the person got off earnings during the EPE period. Well, that is a 60-month period, 5-year period, and claimant who stopped work due to the same disability can be paid while we make a medical decision on their reapplication for benefits. You don't have to wait for a decision for those benefits to begin again because you had them before. We can pay up to 6 months of benefits. Typically, very rarely, would it not or take less than 6 months for our decision. You've already been on benefits before. We already have a case file of disability for you. More often than not, we're making that decision within 6 months. So let's review the numbers. 9 trial work period months, 3 grace months, 36 months EPE, 60 months expedited reinstatement. That's 105 months, almost 9 years that you could be connected to Social Security disability insurance for the cash benefits. Now, none of these rules apply to SSI, just SSDI.
Michael, can I ask you a question?
Sure, go
I
ahead.
hope you don't mind me jumping in like that.
No, I appreciate it. Like my wife doesn't like to hear nor does Patrick like to hear my voice for an extended period of time, nor do myself. So
Nothing to do with your voice, so don't take it personally. It just, things pop in my head and I have to ask.
no, I appreciate it.
So say someone is able to work, let's say 9 months, and something happens where they can't work because their disability is worsened or it's progressed or what have you. and they're off for the next 6 months.
Mhm.
What happens after that 6 months? Do they reapply for the 9 months or for the trial work period, or how does that work?
Good question. Technically, since they would still be within that 5-year rolling period, like you'd mentioned, it's 6 months later after that they worked and earned 9 months. In that case, they would technically, if they worked and earned over the 940, they would have those 3 grace period months, and then they would, if they were working and earning over 940 during those 3 grace period months, then after that the EPE would start. So during those 6 months, they'd be fine, and they'd have to work and earn over 940 for another 3 months after that. Doesn't have to be consecutive in order to get into that zone, that EPE, where it's, okay, are you over 1310 or under 1310? So the timing gets tricky, and
It's confusing, and the best thing to do is have them report, because if you don't report your income, we'll catch it about 10 months late, which means people, if they're getting $1,000 a month, they'll get a $10,000 overpayment.
Right.
Because we'll catch it, but we won't catch it on time. They've recently made some improvements on reporting income. So now if you create an account with us on our website, your own Social Security account, you're going to be able to report your SSDI income on your online, which is probably the easiest way to do it. And that also covers yourself if later we come back and say, hey, you didn't report your income. You're actually printing receipts at your house showing, well, I actually was reporting it online and you guys just didn't do the review. It's not my fault. So that's something you want to let your clients know. And if you personally haven't created an account, you should, because you're able to go on there and get estimates on retirement. You can check to see if your earnings are posted correctly. I know, especially if you've changed jobs, sometimes one of the jobs employers will not report it. So you always want to keep an eye on that.
good point, Patrick. Yeah, reporting is the key, because it's human nature, just like anything else. If someone worked and earned a lot of money in the last 3 years, didn't tell Social Security when they were on benefits for disability, well, there's not a whole lot we would do to help in that situation. They were hiding their earnings or not reporting. We have plenty of notices saying, please report your earnings. But if someone kept reporting their earnings religiously, those are situations where we're more apt to average their earnings or look for ways that they might not be under the SGA limit, and technically be more favorable to their cause, just like kind of anything else. So
There was someone in the meeting earlier that mentioned this 940 that Mike's mentioning, that amount was 910 last year.
Yeah.
So sometimes they get told, hey, you got to keep it below 910. Well, that changes each year. Next year, it'll probably be 970, 980. We don't know. It keeps going up. So that's the beauty of the Red Book, or the updates in the Red Book. You can know what that number, same with the 1310, it'll be a larger number next year. But potentially somebody, I tell folks, if you're on SSDI and you go and make $900 a month, you will continue to receive your benefit permanently, because you're not even using up one of those 9 trial work months. You're essentially, we're only counting it if you make more than 940. You don't make 940, you're not even using up any months. So you could have your entire SSDI benefit as well as let's say the 900 you make from working. So that's something to tell folks, if they're considering returning to work, they could take some baby steps and just get a part-time job.
I just updated the Red Book to the 2021 and added the link to the Spanish version of that too. And they're both on that resource page, employment resource page that we have. I put the link in chat earlier. But that page you'll have Social Security, you'll have the WIPA program, DOR, workability, and you'll have the links to the Red Book and everything. So
Yeah, Rick, I just sent you a list of the link to the WIPA list as well to your email. You
okay,
can
thank you.
disseminate that. Which is, as Denise asked earlier, those are the folks that we're paying to educate the one-on-one our clients on all these work incentives. You know, Mike's gone over a lot of these work incentives, and it's complex even for our own staff. When he was going over that scenario for SSI, you know, the bottom line is if you're on SSI, we don't count the first $85 and then we divide by 2. Even if none of those other special work incentives kick in, if you're just working, you make $1,085, your SSI is going down $500. It's a simple minus 85 divided by 2. That's why you made $1,085, but you only gave up 500. That means, guess what? You're better off. You were sitting at home making $954. Now you got $454 plus $1,085. You know, you're about $1,500. You're financially better off working. Not to mention the fact that your self-esteem is going to go up. You're going to feel better about yourself. If somebody asks you, what do? You have an answer. Well, I work at Petco Park, or I work, you know, at Bonds, or wherever it might be. Again, when you're on SSI, you can report your wages through an app on your phone. Or if you create an account, you can report the wages through your Social Security account, as well as your representative payee. So if your mom or dad, your payee, they can create an account for themselves and then report your wages. So you can get their parents to create a Social Security account, and then they can report their wages for their child through their Social Security account.
Very good. Patrick, that math on the fly was pretty impressive. That San Diego State degree is kicking in right there.
Yeah. I knew it would sooner or later.
We have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Going back to, we just thought about a client who is, he's applying for SSI benefits. He's not eligible at this yet. We're in the process, but he works, he's a provider for through IHSS because he takes care of his disabled mom at home. Is that countable for him? Is that countable income?
Yes. Yeah. If you personally are on SSI and you're working for IHSS, yeah, that counts against you.
Okay.
That does count against you.
And then I have, go ahead.
Well, let's say that my wife and I were both on disability. If I'm working and I'm caring for my wife, well, that would count. That scenario would count because we're both on SSI. The scenario where they're not counted is my wife's on SSI and I'm caring for her. I'm not on SSI. Well, then we exclude that income. Or I'm not on SSI, but my child is, and I'm caring for that child. That does not count. So we always, those IHSS wages, we try to steer towards the higher level employee of the office because they're a little tricky.
Also, you mentioned earlier when somebody doesn't report their income, and let's say, like you said, 10 months, you know, they've received $10,000 in 10 months. What happens to that $10,000? Do you request a payback?
We do. And if they're still receiving benefits, we start collecting it from their benefit. Otherwise, we start garnishing they never see a tax return, so we get all our money back. Or they end up on a payment plan where we start sending. There is a scenario where they could garnish their paycheck, but I don't think we kick that in very often. Typically ends up being, you know, the debt never goes away. 20 years from now, if you still owe money, you will never see a tax return, refund, because they'll keep taking it. Yeah, they'll get the money back.
Any other questions up till now? Those are good ones.
It is a little after 1. I don't know who can hang in, who needs to go. So just, um,
Well, Mike will try to wrap this up, Mike.
We're towards the tail end here.
oh, okay. Okay.
Um, uh, Continuation of Medicare. A lot of people think, oh, I'm working, I have SSDI and I have Medicare, I don't want to lose it. Well, at the end of the trial work period, you could still be tied to Medicare for up to 93 months. So that's 102 months of Medicare you could be eligible for even after working. That's 8.5 years. That's a big help to individuals who are working but might not have health insurance through work. Last pop quiz. I have SSDI and I start working. Which of the following is true? A, I can potentially keep my Medicare for over 8 years. B, I can make as much as I want and still keep my benefits for 12 months. C, if I lose my SSDI after 4 years of working, I can get it back right away within the next 5 years if I have to stop working. D, all the above.
D.
That's right. D as in David. I didn't even give Patrick a chance to get the wrong answer this time. Yeah.
Yeah.
D.
I've seen this quiz before.
You're cheating, Rick.
Just the fact that I remembered it.
Actually, Rick, it's been quite a while, so impressive. Ticket to Work, well, we mentioned that. This is at choosework.net. It also has the list for WIPAs there. Ticket is a voucher to receive rehabilitation or training services from employment networks, a free program. Almost everyone receiving SSDI or SSI ages 18 to 64 can take advantage of this. This is help for obtaining employment and specifically links to employers who are apt to hire those with disabling conditions. Claimant contacts Maximus. That's the company we've contracted to administer the program. That's a 1-800 number, or go on choosework.net. And a big plus of the program, besides being free, besides help towards getting a job, is that if you have an active ticket to work, we cannot open one of those continuing disability reviews that happen every 3 to 7 years on your case. Meaning that's a kind of a buffer against the danger of your disability benefits going away due to somehow a negative or unfavorable disability review where we say, up, you're no longer disabled. We can't even open up that review if you have an active ticket to work. So it's a protection that way. Free program, makes all the sense in the world to use it in that respect. PASS program, that's what Patrick and I help administer. Stands for Plan to Achieve Self-Support. It's a funding program for education, tons of different types of expenses. Each plan is a little bit different. Tuition, books, transportation, laptops, childcare, tools, clothing, internet, are just a small list of the various things we can help fund through PASS. Can last up to 4.5 years or more for education. We have people going for their masters or PhDs even. And in the PASS program, it lasts 18 months for those in self-employment. It's to help pay startup costs for tools, equipment, advertising, all sorts of things. We've had many successful participants. Like Patrick said, it's kind of like typically a financial aid program. So if you're on benefits through disability and are in school or interested in self-employment, to let us know. An applicant must have SSDI or SSI with some other income. That other income could be SSDI as well, or a part-time job through work, or maybe their SSI goes down because of their parents' income. You can get a PASS program if you're age 15 or above, or maybe their SSI is going down because of their spouse's income. So various ways they can take advantage of that. And if you have interest in the PASS program, you can always contact myself or Patrick. Rick has our information as well there. Disability rights, we mentioned the WIPA. There are local WIPA here for San Diego, Imperial, and Riverside counties. That's Leda Taruno. That's their address, downtown San Diego, and their number their 800 number there. They're a good organization to contact as well. ABLE accounts. Oh, I'm working, but I want to save up money towards expenses for education or towards a lot of different expenses, really. It's achieving a better life experience. Tax advantage account for saving funds for disability related expenses. Education, housing, transportation, health, training, technology, funeral, living costs. Very rarely is there an expense that we would somehow count against the SSI resource limit for an ABLE account. It's most things are excluded. It's only really if you take in money out of your ABLE account, leave it in your regular account for more than a month, and then use it towards, say, a living expense, where that might count as a conversion of resources towards the SSI resource limit. But other than that, most expenditures are excludable. Contributions to the account can be from the individual who has the ABLE account that's on benefits, or from anyone else. Auntie M can contribute to the ABLE account, and it does not account up to a limit of $15,000 per year. Now, this limit, by the way, has gone up for those who have the ABLE account and working themselves. So you can contribute more or less up to another additional 12 grand if you're working and say your employer doesn't contribute to a 401k plan. There's some stipulation regarding that, but if they don't, you can contribute an additional 12 grand a year for a total of about 27 grand per year into the ABLE account. Now, the account exclusion is capped at $100,000. So any balance over $100,000 counts towards the $2,000 SSI resource limit. But you can find more information on ABLE through CalABLE. That's the California's version of the ABLE account program. There's some advantages to individuals living in California or outside California to that program with CalABLE. There's a national ABLE clearinghouse for information as well. And if anyone's interested, I can get you that information. Rick and I have talked about kind of doing more trainings for the spinal network and more information regarding the ABLE account, because some policies have changed. They all have been favorable to those who want to open an account. That's another work incentive too, because you can work and stash that money from work and not have it count against your SSI limits. Wrapping up here, e-services online. You can apply at socialsecurity.gov or SSA.gov for short. Do all these different things online, and it seems like every 3 to 6 months they're adding more capabilities for online services. Patrick mentioned the wage reporting that has opened up quite a bit recently to make it easier for people to report their wages with an account. These are the magic numbers to the actual Social Security offices in the county. So you're not calling the 1-800 number with thousands and thousands of people each day and waiting 2 hours to get to somebody. These are the actual magic numbers to each local office. How to contact the PASS cadre. This is our information for Patrick and I if you're interested in that program. We're out of the downtown office. And of course, the slide you've all been waiting for. And thank you guys very much for your time and attention today, for the great questions. If you have any more questions at this time, if you'd like to ask them.
Thank you, Patrick and Michael. We'll certainly go on the Spinal Network website and look up those links because that's helpful to us. We are just in the last year alone, our company is now assisting so many people with, and they're all different scenarios. So this is very helpful to us because it only makes it easier for us to be able to help them when we have this knowledge and we have context, which is helpful.
Hey, if you want us to speak to your organization, we're a traveling roadshow. Rick doesn't have us on retainer. Our services are free to him too. So let us know. We do presentations all the time. Patrick and I are the de facto kind of face of work incentives for Social Security in the area, also for Hawaii and Arizona seemingly as well, because our jurisdiction with PASS is about 50 offices. And because PASS is a work incentive, we're tasked with kind of helping spread the word about all the other work incentives as well.
Okay, good to
I'd
know.
like to
Thank
just
you.
mention about those ABLE accounts. That's not something that Social Security created, but if you have parents that have kids on SSI, that's how they are going to be able to accumulate more than 2,000 or 3,000. Their child has to be disabled before the age 26. So
Okay,
that would be anybody that's a child would be eligible. But that's how they can accumulate wealth, or they can start putting money in that account for their child and not have them become ineligible for SSI, because that's excluded from that $2,000 rule. So that's a recent legislation that, you just call your local, tell them to call their local bank or credit union and say, I want to open an ABLE account. And that's the way because they put money in there and the child could pull it out and we wouldn't count it. And normally if you parent gave the money to the child, we'd say, that's income. But if mom puts $1,000 in the ABLE account, then the next month the child pulls the money out, we don't count it. So it's a way to circumvent the rules against you when you're on SSI.
Also, to that point, great point, Patrick, say if you're in your 40s and 50s, you could get an ABLE account if you were proven to have been disabled by either a federal, which is us, or state entity before the age of 26. So you don't have to be under the age of 26 to get an ABLE account. You just have to have been to be disabled by a federal or state entity, typically federal, but sometimes state as well, before the age of 26.